The standards you hold for yourself act as an invisible force that governs the trajectory of your life. They are not merely rules or preferences, but deeply ingrained expectations that determine what you will accept, what you will reject, and what you will pursue with unwavering commitment. When a person sets high standards, they essentially raise the threshold of what is tolerable in their existence. A person who expects excellence from themselves cannot settle for mediocrity. They cannot linger in the comfort zone where there is no growth. This is because standards are the foundation upon which habits are built, and habits are the stepping stones toward destiny. If someone chooses to demand more from themselves in thought, speech, and action, they will inevitably craft a different path, one that reflects those higher expectations. Napoleon Hill emphasized that every success begins in the mind, and the standards of the mind are the first determining factor of whether one ascends to greatness or remains trapped in ordinary circumstances. Think of standards as the silent architect of character. If a person holds themselves to the standard of honesty, they cannot permit lies to take root in their dealings, even if dishonesty might bring temporary gain. If a person holds themselves to the standard of persistence, setbacks cannot define them because they refuse to quit. Each time an individual adheres to a standard, they shape themselves into a person capable of greater achievement. Life does not give us what we desire, it gives us what we demand of ourselves. Desires remain dreams until they are coupled with standards that force us to act in alignment with them. When someone raises their standards, they automatically raise their level of action, effort, and resilience. Standards become a mirror of self-respect, and they reveal to the world what we believe we deserve. A person's destiny is not dictated by luck, circumstance, or external influence nearly as much as it is by the standards they quietly set within. Two people may face the same hardship. One lowers their standards and accepts defeat, while the other raises their standards and refuses to allow adversity to define them. Over time, their lives diverge completely, not because one was blessed with more opportunities, but because one expected more of themselves. Standards operate as a compass that always points toward growth or decline depending on where they are set. This means that if you currently find yourself dissatisfied with life, you must not only look at what you want, but at what you are willing to no longer tolerate. Dissatisfaction is often the signal that your standards are not in harmony with your potential. Consider the story of an individual who dreams of wealth but tolerates financial mismanagement, wasteful spending, and a lack of discipline. Their dream of wealth cannot be realized because their standards for handling money are inconsistent with prosperity. Contrast this with someone who demands accountability from themselves. They hold the standard of saving a portion of every dollar they earn, of investing wisely, and of learning how to grow their resources. Over time, this person moves steadily toward wealth, not because of extraordinary talent, but because their standards shaped behaviors that compounded into financial freedom. The underlying principle remains: standards create habits, habits create results, and results create destiny. The transformative power of standards lies in their ability to influence decision-making. Every decision we make, whether trivial or monumental, is filtered through the standards we carry. If a person's standard is to maintain peak health, they will consistently choose nourishing foods, regular exercise, and sufficient rest. They cannot betray that standard without feeling they have stepped out of alignment with their true self. If, on the other hand, someone has low standards for their health, they will consistently rationalize poor choices, convincing themselves that tomorrow is a better day to change. This contrast demonstrates how standards are not abstract ideals, but active forces guiding every choice, and those choices accumulate into the quality of a life. Napoleon Hill taught that definiteness of purpose is the first principle of success, but purpose cannot thrive without corresponding standards to support it. A purpose without standards becomes a wish that drifts aimlessly. For example, a person may declare a purpose to become a leader in their field, but if their standards allow laziness, distraction, and excuses, they will never fulfill that purpose. To achieve anything significant, standards must rise to meet the demands of purpose. It is not enough to hope or to want. One must decide what they will no longer accept from themselves. When someone draws this line and refuses to step below it, they create an internal law that governs their behavior and keeps them aligned with growth. Standards also act as boundaries that protect energy and focus. A person with high standards does not surround themselves with toxic people who drain ambition. They do not tolerate environments filled with negativity or mediocrity because their standards require them to cultivate influences that elevate rather than diminish. In this way, raising personal standards not only changes the individual, but reshapes the environment around them. Others respond differently when they witness someone who consistently demands excellence from themselves. Respect increases, opportunities appear, and doors that once seemed closed begin to open. The world mirrors back what we insist upon for ourselves, and this is why standards are inseparable from destiny. Changing one's standards requires courage because it means stepping into discomfort. It means letting go of familiar habits that feel safe but destructive. It means breaking away from patterns that have kept you stagnant. Yet this courage is the seed of transformation. When you tell yourself, "I will no longer accept this level of living," you ignite a force within that begins to attract higher possibilities. This decision alone separates those who remain trapped in mediocrity from those who rise above it. History is filled with examples of individuals who changed their lives not because circumstances changed first, but because they raised their standards and demanded more of themselves even when no one else believed they could achieve it. The destiny of a person is written in the standards they embrace daily. Those who demand more discipline create lives of order and achievement. Those who demand more growth create lives of learning and expansion. Those who demand more contribution create lives of significance and legacy. On the other hand, those who settle for less than their potential will always find themselves repeating the same cycles of frustration, never breaking free from limitations that are self-imposed. It is not fate that binds them but the quiet acceptance of low standards. The moment one decides to elevate those standards, life begins to reorganize itself around the new expectations. And so, the path of destiny is always available, waiting for the individual who chooses to demand more from themselves than they ever have before. When a person chooses to keep their standards low, they simultaneously choose to limit the possibilities of their life. Low standards mean accepting less than what one is capable of, tolerating mediocrity, and permitting habits that stifle growth. These lowered expectations form invisible chains, binding an individual to a cycle of average results and unfulfilled potential. Instead of reaching for excellence, they settle for good enough, not realizing that every time they lower the bar, they reinforce an identity that is smaller than their true capacity. Life responds not to what people casually desire, but to what they demand of themselves. When someone accepts excuses, procrastination, or laziness as part of their standards, life delivers circumstances that reflect those choices. In this way, low standards do not just create limitations. They become the very prison walls that confine a person's destiny. Mediocrity, though comfortable, is one of the most dangerous places to live. It whispers that things are fine as they are, that nothing needs to change, and that improvement can wait until tomorrow. but mediocrity robs a person of urgency and gradually eats away at ambition. Imagine a person who aspires to achieve financial independence but allows themselves to consistently overspend, live paycheck to paycheck, and ignore opportunities to learn about wealth building. Their low standard for financial discipline ensures that independence will remain an unreachable dream. Another person may want to be physically strong and healthy, but tolerates overeating, skipping exercise, and neglecting rest. Their low standard for self-care ensures that their health deteriorates, even though the possibility of strength and vitality is within them. These examples highlight how limitations are rarely imposed from the outside. More often, they are self-imposed by the unwillingness to demand more from oneself. Excuses are the natural companion of low standards. Whenever someone chooses not to rise above mediocrity, they seek justification for remaining where they are. They might blame circumstances, the economy, their upbringing, or the actions of others. Yet these excuses are nothing more than a defense mechanism to avoid confronting the truth, that their standards are too low. Napoleon Hill often emphasized that successful people refuse to accept excuses, even from themselves. They recognize that progress requires accountability, and accountability can only thrive where standards are high. Excuses, by contrast, allow limitations to multiply. The more one tolerates them, the easier it becomes to accept failure as normal. Over time, a life built on excuses begins to shrink until it bears no resemblance to the dreams once held in the imagination. Low standards are also deceptive because they often disguise themselves as comfort. A person may believe they are at peace because they are not pushing themselves, not risking failure, and not demanding more. But in truth, this false comfort is a slow erosion of the spirit. Deep down, every human being knows they are capable of more, and when they ignore that calling, they experience frustration, boredom, and dissatisfaction. This discontent is not caused by external lack, but by the betrayal of one's own potential. A person who knows they could be healthier, wealthier, more disciplined, or more impactful, but chooses not to raise their standards carries a quiet burden of regret. That regret accumulates over time until it becomes heavy enough to suffocate enthusiasm for life. Another way low standards create limitations is through the company one keeps. People with low standards naturally attract others who think the same way. Mediocrity seeks companionship, and when surrounded by individuals who also tolerate excuses, laziness, or negativity, it becomes almost impossible to break free. Together, such groups reinforce each other's limitations. They normalize procrastination, gossip, lack of ambition, and fear of change. Over time, this collective mindset becomes a cage that is difficult to escape. On the other hand, raising personal standards often requires breaking away from such circles and seeking out those who demand excellence from themselves. This is uncomfortable because it exposes how low standards have been tolerated for too long, but it is also liberating because it shows that a new environment is possible. The danger of low standards is that they often feel easier in the short term. It is easier to skip the workout than to train, easier to watch television than to study, easier to spend recklessly than to budget, easier to give up than to persist. But while low standards grant temporary ease, they exact a heavy price in the long term. That price is stagnation, lost potential, and the pain of unrealized dreams. A life built on low standards becomes a life of missed opportunities, where a person constantly wonders why others succeed while they remain stuck. The truth is not that the successful are lucky or gifted beyond measure. It is that they set standards for themselves that refuse to allow mediocrity. They decide that certain behaviors are unacceptable, and in doing so, they force themselves to grow into someone capable of greater success. Every breakthrough in life comes from raising the threshold of what one will no longer accept. When someone declares, "I will no longer tolerate being unhealthy," they begin to take steps toward fitness. When someone declares, "I will no longer accept being broke," they begin to learn, earn, and manage money differently. When someone declares, "I will no longer allow fear to control me," they begin to act with courage. But none of this can happen while low standards remain in place. So long as a person tolerates mediocrity, their life will be filled with limitations, because the universe always mirrors back the level of demand one places upon oneself. Low standards also breed inconsistency. When there is no clear line of expectation, behavior fluctuates according to mood, circumstances, or convenience. One day a person may work hard, the next they may slack off, and because they have no firm standard, both are acceptable. This inconsistency prevents mastery in any area of life. Success requires repeated effort over time, and repeated effort is only possible when high standards demand it. Without such discipline, a person becomes trapped in cycles of starting and quitting, gaining and losing, dreaming and abandoning. They never move beyond average results because their standards allow inconsistency to dominate their actions. Perhaps the greatest limitation created by low standards is the erosion of self-belief. Each time someone accepts less than their best, they reinforce the idea that they are incapable of more. Confidence is not built by luck, but by living up to the expectations one sets for themselves. When standards are low, confidence diminishes because a person knows deep inside that they are capable of more but refuse to demand it. Over time, this undermines self-esteem and makes it harder to attempt new challenges. In contrast, high standards build confidence with every action taken in alignment with them. But the person who tolerates low standards robs themselves of this power, chaining themselves to a limited vision of what they can achieve. Life always meets us at the level of our standards. Those who tolerate low standards find themselves confined by limitation, mediocrity, and regret. Those who refuse to accept anything less than excellence open the door to growth, achievement, and fulfillment. The difference is not in talent, luck, or opportunity, but in the quiet decision of what one chooses to demand from oneself. Definiteness of purpose lies at the very heart of Napoleon Hill's philosophy, and it cannot exist without a foundation of high standards. A clear purpose is like a compass that points a person in the right direction, but it is the standards they set for themselves that keep them on the path when obstacles arise. Without standards, even the strongest sense of purpose dissolves into mere wishful thinking. When someone says they want to achieve success, wealth, health, or influence, but permits laziness, inconsistency, or excuses, their purpose remains nothing more than a statement of desire. A definite purpose must be supported by equally definite standards, or else it becomes fragile, easily broken by distraction or adversity. Purpose without standards is like a building designed on paper, but never constructed in reality. Standards are the bricks and mortar that give structure and permanence to the dream. When a person defines their purpose, they are making a declaration of what they want from life. Yet this declaration alone is not enough to carry them forward. The daily actions, choices, and disciplines that bring purpose into existence must be governed by elevated expectations. A person who says their purpose is to lead others cannot afford to hold low standards in integrity, communication, or work ethic. A leader who accepts dishonesty, procrastination, or inconsistency undermines their own credibility and betrays the very essence of their stated purpose. In the same way, an aspiring artist who claims their purpose is to create timeless works, but tolerates a lack of practice or creativity, is betraying themselves through low standards. Purpose demands a matching level of discipline, and that discipline can only come from refusing to accept mediocrity in daily life. The role of standards in sustaining purpose becomes especially clear during moments of difficulty. Everyone who pursues a meaningful goal will encounter setbacks, rejection, or unforeseen challenges. At such times, purpose alone may not be enough to maintain momentum. It is easy to say, "I have a purpose." But without the standard of persistence, most people give up when progress becomes painful or slow. A high standard requires that one continues moving forward regardless of discouragement, that quitting is not an option, and that failure is treated as feedback rather than finality. This unwavering commitment transforms purpose into reality because it ensures that one's actions are consistent with their declared aim. Standards are what prevent a temporary obstacle from becoming a permanent defeat. Standards also determine the quality of focus a person applies to their purpose. It is not difficult to announce a purpose. It is far more challenging to remain devoted to it over time without allowing distractions to erode focus. Here is where standards draw the line. If someone has the standard that their purpose is sacred, they will not waste precious hours on trivial activities that steal their attention. They will not allow negative influences to crowd out their clarity. They will not permit themselves to live without a schedule or plan. This high standard ensures that their purpose is continually nourished with time, energy, and attention. Without such standards, even the most passionate purpose loses momentum because it becomes buried under the weight of distraction and inconsistency. Purpose supported by standards also transforms a person's identity. When someone raises their standards to align with their goals, they begin to see themselves not as who they currently are, but as who they are becoming. For instance, a person whose purpose is to become a respected writer must hold themselves to the standard of writing daily, studying language, and improving their craft. Over time, these standards shift their identity from a dreamer to a disciplined creator. Similarly, someone whose purpose is to inspire others through public speaking must adopt the standards of practicing speeches, refining their message, and continually learning. With each act of adherence to high standards, they transform into the person who is worthy of fulfilling their purpose. Without this alignment, their purpose remains disconnected from their reality, and identity never evolves beyond wishful thinking. The connection between standards and purpose also influences the kind of people and opportunities a person attracts. When someone holds themselves to low standards while claiming to pursue a great purpose, others quickly sense the inconsistency. They may say they want to build a business empire, but if they tolerate disorganization and unreliability, potential partners and clients will not take them seriously. In contrast, when someone's standards reflect excellence, they attract people who respect and align with that purpose. Their environment gradually shifts in support of their mission because others trust that they are serious, disciplined, and consistent. Standards signal to the world the seriousness of one's purpose, and the world responds accordingly by offering opportunities and resources to those who are clearly committed. The sustaining power of standards is also evident in how they influence resilience. Purpose can be inspiring, but inspiration fades when faced with repeated failure. What keeps a person moving forward in those dark times is not a fleeting emotional high, but the firm standard that says, "I will not give up." This standard is what allows inventors, artists, entrepreneurs, and leaders to endure countless rejections or setbacks until success is achieved. It is not the initial declaration of purpose that carries them through. It is the unwavering adherence to standards of discipline, patience, and resilience. History is filled with examples of individuals who were not necessarily the most talented, but who possessed unshakable standards that aligned with their purpose, and it was this consistency that brought them victory. Furthermore, High standards force a person to measure progress honestly. Without standards, it is easy to deceive oneself into believing that purpose is being pursued when in reality, very little effort is being applied. A person who claims their purpose is to achieve excellence in their career, but who accepts mediocre work cannot claim alignment between purpose and action. High standards demand honest evaluation. Did I give my best today? Did my actions move me closer to my goal? Did I live in a way that reflects my stated purpose? These questions, guided by elevated standards, prevent self-deception and create continuous improvement. Over time, this honesty compounds into mastery and achievement. Ultimately, definiteness of purpose becomes powerful only when it is intertwined with the uncompromising standards that govern behavior, decisions, and persistence. A clear vision alone is fragile. It becomes strong when backed by the discipline of high standards. Purpose points the way, but standards pave the road. Without standards, purpose remains a dream. With standards, purpose becomes destiny. A person who understands this truth begins to see that the life they desire is not created by occasional bursts of motivation, but by the daily enforcement of standards that align with their greater aim. The more unwavering those standards, the stronger the foundation upon which their purpose can rise.